If you only read one book on personal finance, then The Simple Path to Wealth is the book I would read. And if you only want the key takeaways from that book, then this is the video I would watch. Today I'm going to highlight the 5 key takeaways you need from The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins. I'll also highlight the most important sentence in the book, which could change your whole life. And I'll also show you the one metric that tells me if you're going to reach financial independence or whether you'll be working until you're 70. The Simple Path to Wealth is one of my favourite books. I've read a lot of books on personal finance, but when I read this book, I thought, this guy just gets it. He's laid out the path perfectly. It's easy to read, concepts are simple, explanations are perfect, and his approach to managing your money and your investing, it just works. So let's get straight into it. The number one takeaway for me was that debt isn't just bad, it's like an evil cancer. He starts the book really aggressively actually by sort of making his feelings on debt really clear. And I quote from the book, if you intend to achieve financial freedom, you're going to have to think differently. It starts by recognizing that debt should not be considered normal. It should be recognized as the vicious, pernicious destroyer of wealth building potential that it truly is. He basically goes on to compare having debt to being a slave. He goes to great lengths to explain all the reasons why it's holding you back and destroying your life. Debt's taking away from your ability to build your wealth, which means you're going to have to work for many, many more years. For most of us, debt's a normal and expected part of life, but he's saying you need to get rid of that mindset. Instead, realize that debt doesn't have to be normal. It doesn't have to be required. For those that have any debts over an interest rate of 5%, he strongly suggests you pay it off ASAP. Eliminating all non-essential spending to pay off that debt as quickly as possible using the debt avalanche method. I did a video on eliminating your debt which talks about that same theory, so I'll link below. Subscribe to this channel as well to learn about money, budgeting, eliminating debt and building your wealth. Collins goes on to talk about buying a house and having a mortgage with a brilliant concept. I really love this one. He says you should seek the least house you need to meet your needs rather than the most house you can technically afford. Seriously, it's really great advice. Every person I know, and unfortunately myself included, who have ever talked to about buying a house has always started by going to the bank and asking how much they can borrow first. Then they borrow that much and they spend the next 30 years paying lots of interest. J.L. Collins looks at it top down instead. If you instead work out what's the most basic house you need and borrow the minimum amount you can, just so you can get what you need, then you can probably be financially independent about 10 years earlier. So focus on what you need, not what you want. Takeaway number 1 is to avoid debt at all costs, or the debt is going to cost you. Takeaway number 2 is FU money. He talks about this early in the book, and in a lot of ways it's sort of the why he thinks that you need financial independence. He says that money isn't the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is freedom. The freedom to work if you want to, the freedom to spend your time your way. He says money can buy many things, but nothing more valuable than your freedom. And this includes the freedom to say F you to a boss so you can walk out whenever you want. And if you don't like your boss, you don't like your job, the people, the customers, the work, if you've got FU money, then you can just walk out the door. He's careful to mention that this freedom doesn't just come from making lots of money. He talks about how being independently wealthy is every bit as much about limiting needs as it is about how much money you have. He gives lots of examples of high income earners that go broke and other examples of low income earners that get to financial freedom. So takeaway number 2 is to build up your FU money so you have options in life. And while building up your wealth is important, controlling your needs and limiting your spending, it's equally important. Takeaway number 3 is beautiful in its simplicity but incredibly powerful. You need to be careful. It's easy to underestimate how important what I'm about to say is. This can seem too simple and too obvious, but the reality is that most people don't do it. It's one thing to hear what I say and logically understand it, but you don't get the value until you take action and really apply it to your life. It can be summed up in one quote from the book. If you remember nothing else from this book or this video, remember this. Spend less than you earn, invest the surplus, avoid debt. Again, I know it sounds too simple, but if you really understand this and apply it, then you start to grow. Let me say it again. Spend less than you earn, invest the surplus, avoid debt. He talks about the double benefit of this. The less money you spend, the less money you need to live. The less money you need to live, the less money you need to retire. The less you need to retire, the quicker you reach financial freedom. So obviously, that's the first benefit. But also, the less you are spending, it means you've got more to invest, which builds your wealth quicker and gets you to financial freedom faster. So someone that invests 20% of their income compared to someone investing 10% of their income doesn't get ahead a little bit faster. They get ahead a lot faster. He shows calculations in the book around investing and the power of compound growth, which is really common in lots of books about personal finance. Compound growth is truly amazing, but it takes time to kick in, and once it does, it's like throwing fuel on a fire. But the key point is, start investing as soon as you can. Spend less than you earn, invest the surplus, avoid debt. Takeaway number 4 for me is about specifically what to invest in and why. He's a big fan of the stock market. I think he said the market always goes up and is always a wild and rocky ride along the way. Since we can't predict these swings, we need to toughen up mentally and ride them out. Look, this is great advice. In the history of the US market, it has always gone up in the long term. Not every day, week, month, or even every year. It's a rocky ride, and you need to know that, accept it, and to toughen up and ride out the bumps so you get the benefits in the long term for being tough in the short term. He talks about fear and greed and how fear is very normal and understandable because none of us wants to lose money. But if you let fear prevent you from investing, it's going to be deadly to your wealth. The safe option is to save money and just leave it in the bank, but you can't save your way to retirement. He reinforces that message that markets always go up, but they will crash along the way, and you just need to toughen up. He keeps saying that many times through the middle of the book. He also highlights the main reason people lose money when investing. People think they can time the market. People think they can pick individual stocks that will be winners. They can't. End of story. Takeaway number 4 is to invest for your future. Invest in the stock market, invest for the long term, and be mentally tough so you can ride out the bad times that will happen along the journey. My last big takeaway from The Simple Path to Wealth is exactly what to invest in. At points in the book, he talks about bonds and cash, and when push comes to shove, he passes on the advice he gives to his own daughter. Actually, just for context, this whole book sort of came out of emails that he wrote to teach his daughter about money. And it's important to note that his daughter was probably in her 20s when he gave this advice. So she still had like 20 or 30 working years ahead of her before retirement. This means it isn't necessarily perfect advice for someone coming up to retirement or someone who's already retired. But if you're in your 20s, he said that you could have this nicely diversified fund with bonds and cash to try and smooth out the ups and downs. But he emphatically says, screw that. You're young, aggressive, and you're here to build wealth. You're out to build your pot of FU money ASAP. So he says to focus on the best performing asset class in history, stocks. In particular, he says to buy the Total Stock Market Index Fund, specifically given the code VTSAX. That's for the Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund. This index fund allows you to own a tiny percentage of every company listed on the exchange with one simple investment. Buying a tiny piece of every share on the market, that just gives you this massive diversity across a whole bunch of companies in your investments. And it's also very low cost, like really low cost. And just keep buying. Buy into the index fund every month and don't sell. Reinvest your dividends and just let it grow. This is his suggestion for wealth accumulation, or what you should be doing during your working years. He then suggests moving about 25% of your portfolio to bonds as you get within sort of 5 to 10 years of that financial freedom. This will reduce the volatility, stop the large up and down swings, which is a better strategy for wealth preservation, which is what you'll need later on in life. So that's it. That's the 5 big takeaways you need. If you read the whole book, he goes into more detail on why all this stuff works and give lots of examples and numbers. And I would recommend you read the whole thing, but if you're only going to read one book on personal finance, then this is the best one to choose. It gives a great overview of all the most important money concepts. Plus, as the title suggests, it lays out a really simple path to wealth. To wrap up, I got one other really cool concept from the book. The one number that tells you if you're going to retire early, if you're going to reach financial freedom, and if you're going to have that FU money. It's the percentage of your pay you invest. The lower the amount you spend and the more you invest makes all the difference. It's the only number that you fully control, and it's got the biggest impact on your financial future. It might be a difficult conversation, but you should have a conversation with yourself. What percentage of your income last year did you invest for your financial future? If the answer is nothing, then that's pretty normal. Outside of 401k, most people don't invest. Some put some money into a Roth, but most people don't. To have freedom in the future, you need to get to a place where you can live off your investments, so you don't have to work. You now know why this is so important and how to do it. So stop the excuses, take ownership, learn along the way, and increase the amount you're investing for your future. If you decide you want a brighter financial future, then now is the time to manage your money, destroy your debt, limit your spending, and invest. Because if you want to be financially free in the future, you need to grow today.